All right, welcome to Halitics on Tuesday. So glad to have you with us. Don't forget, click subscribe, bottom right corner, and click like as well if you like what we're doing here. Certainly hope you do. Also, remember, you can always call in when I'm live, 240-363-7190. That's why I do this program the way I do it, live, so we can talk, dialogue. It's all about coming to solutions to the thorniest problems we face as a society and in our world. We have with us our Revolution Ohio chair, Diane Morgan. She solved a problem just last week, and we're going to talk about how we can maybe use the lessons learned from that successful win, the defeat of issue one, as we move forward in this 2023 and in the election year next year, 24. Good morning, Diane, and thanks so much for being with us. Or actually, it's afternoon now. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
It's great to talk to you. It's been a while. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I was elated last week, that's for sure.
Well, you
But we
just tell us why you were so happy about that result, and were you concerned going in?
in the beginning, it was a little bit nerve-wracking, but there's a coalition of over 200 organizations that came together to work on this and help defeat issue one. What was great was it was nonpartisan all across the board. We had Republicans, independents, Democrats working together to defeat this. And people saw through that it was a blatant attempt by the illegal supermajority here in Ohio in the state house and Senate that was trying to take away the rights of of Ohioans, of everyday Ohioans. And so we came together and totally defeated this, and by a great margin too. So,
Yeah.
the credit belongs to the people of Ohio that came out and voted, and some of them voted hell no. They wish there was on the ballot, like hell no. So it's really good. Yeah. So tell me what you'd like to learn
Well,
about.
issue one, I just want to explain for listeners. We did talk about this a little bit, but just to make it real clear, there's on the ballot in November in Ohio, and please correct me if I'm wrong at any point, Diane, a ballot initiative to enshrine in the Ohio Constitution the right to choose reproductive rights with respect to abortion. It looks like this bill, this constitutional amendment, is very likely to pass with, I think, 59% of Ohioans in support. So to defeat that the will of the majority to protect the right to choose, the Republican Party rammed through a early initiative to raise the threshold, as you can see, for approving any changes to 60%, which would have made it a very, very close race and made it much harder to protect women's right and girls' right to control their bodies with respect to pregnancy. So, I mean, what do we learn from this? I mean, the first lesson, it sounds like you're saying, is that coalition building is crucial, working on the same side of the aisle, but I think also crossing the aisle. Is that right, Diane?
Absolutely. We had a former attorney general who was Republican, Betty Montgomery, who was touring the state and telling Republican voters that this is not right for Ohioans. Former Republican governors were out canvassing and meeting with voters and telling them that this is not right for Ohioans. The interesting thing, though, is last year the state legislature created a law that there could not be any special elections in August. So they actually had to go back and change their law so they could ramrod this through and try to block any Ohio citizen ballot initiatives. And so what I think that the majority saw was, no matter where you are on the political spectrum, this takes away your power to challenge what's going on in the state house and to say, we have the right to self-rule, minority rule. And, right now, the biggest issue besides the reproductive rights that's going to be on there are two. We've started the process here in Ohio to get gerrymandering again, fair districts on the ballot for next year. Now, we were excited last year when it looked like we
let
might
me just interrupt you to understand this, because I'm not quite clear what you're saying. So when you say put gerrymandering on the ballot, what would voters in Ohio have the power to do with respect to those legislative districts?
Mm-hmm. So last year, we had fair districts were voted by the citizens of Ohio through a ballot initiative so that we would have to have fair maps. The state legislature refused to act on it. The commission that came out of that ballot initiative was made up of politicians, and the Republicans dominated that commission. So what we're doing now is going for an independent commission, not made up of politicians. It even went to the Ohio Supreme Court, and the Ohio Supreme Court said, you have to create fair maps, and they totally disregarded it and ran out the clock. So we don't have what you could consider legal representation in our state houses because they've defied the Ohio Supreme Court. And it's kind of like what they're doing in Alabama, like, oh, you can't make me, right? It's kind of like what they're saying. And we even tried to get them to be held in contempt, but because we didn't have a majority on the Ohio Supreme Court, they were not. So this is another ballot initiative that if issue 1 had passed would have had to have 60% threshold. And that's what they wanted. They wanted to take the power away from the people. Another one that's coming up is ranked choice voting. So they're actually looking at passing legislation to prohibit that from ever occurring in Ohio. But meanwhile, there's a ballot initiative that is going to be going on the ballot in 2024 for ranked choice voting, which would really help Ohioans with actually having fair representation.
I mean, so this is all super exciting stuff, mm-hmm. And this is a state we call that is pegged as red these days. I want to ask in a moment if that is going to be the case next year in the presidential election, in your opinion. But I mean, this is really cool stuff, and plus, I was pretty surprised. I was somewhat surprised to read that nearly 6 in 10 Ohioans do support the right to choose, at least I think in the first 2 trimesters. Is that right? Or mm-hmm. how does that law or how does the proposed amendment read with respect to the right to choose?
It would let me see if I can recollect. It pretty much is up to I think the second trimester. Don't quote me. I'm not.
That was my understanding. That's why I said that through the first 6 months, but I might be wrong about that. Obviously, I mean, I'm often wrong about a lot, which Diane knows. And let me full disclosure here, transparency. She and I have worked together for years, or had worked together for years at Our Revolution. Diane is the chair of Our Revolution Ohio, does a tremendous job, as you hear, but also is a national organizer as well. And since I left, I'm sure that makes your job a lot easier, Diane. I know, not saying that all the messes that she had to clean up are now no longer there to be tidied up after. Now, so it's very exciting stuff. And so we mentioned the right to choose, reproductive rights supported by most Ohioans. We also have ranked choice voting, which is likely to go through, and also kind of a demand from the electorate that, hey, the district should fairly be drawn, mm-hmm. so that we don't have either party able to kind of manipulate maps to their benefit and have super majorities. So why then, given this, and I think I've always thought of Ohio being of a certain age, relatively progressive, certainly a workers' state, yet has recently moved. The state of Howard Metzenbaum, the state of who's your mayor of Cleveland, and then he ran to Kucinich, and now a Republican red state with a Republican governor. And how did that happen, Diane?
Well, I'd love to have a straight answer for that.
Well, the
But
answer on
it's hard.
this show is
Hard.
always it's the Democrats' fault. That's our answer
Mm.
at all times.
Well, and it went twice for Obama. Yeah. And I actually worked on the Obama campaign in '08, and you know, big backlash, against Obama. The Tea Party started, and it just, and many of you might know, are familiar with how, during the Clinton grip on the Democratic Party, all the state coffers were drained and everything went upwards towards the Democrat, DNC and stuff like that. Well, the state parties were pretty much stripped of any financial resources. And the one here in Ohio just kind of fell apart. And, they didn't think about the fact that there was this move by conservatives, especially after Obama, to take over state legislatures across the country. And one of them was here in Ohio. So, so you had a party that's falling apart, that's not financially funded, and is not getting any help from the national party, left to its own resources. And the other part is we don't have a bench. We didn't have a bench. And so, everything, the focus was on, every presidential election, and not looking at the midterms, not looking at, local elections, city council, state legislature. Everything was, just 2020, 2016, 2020, and all that. And so states like ours were kind of left to our own devices, which wasn't good, but we're fighting back. We are fighting back here in Ohio. And ironically, the former party chair, David Pepper, is the one who's out there fighting, not just here in Ohio, but across the country, about these laboratories of autocracy that have been created. And so people are waking up to what's happened. So we do have a chance. We have a chance to go get, to go back to purple. But, until we take care of the fair districts, they're just going to run roughshod over us. And we need to change that. So I'm excited about it.
I'll tell you what, Diane, I really appreciate your sharing that information. I was not familiar with that history. So I thank you very much. I know you're looking around for me, but I just put you up on the screen just for you so we could have just Diane being shown to the viewers, listeners, etc. In the moment. I'll put myself back on in a second, but I really just sort of want to spotlight you there. This is really interesting. So one of the lessons we learn, and I'll put your lessons back on in just a second, is to build coalitions even across the aisle. That's doable with reproductive rights. We know that especially Republican women, but many Republicans, and the libertarian strand in the Republican Party does support reproductive rights, does support choice. What about issues that may be more partisan? And I'm thinking specifically now about a clean green environment. Is this something that you think you can work with Republicans even, or centrist Democrats, to pass legislation that would ensure some type of I don't know what the right sustainability in the Buckeye State there?
I doubt that we'll be able to get anything done here, and the main reason is we're in a good place as far as climate resilience, and I don't think that it is a top priority for most of those in power here, because of where we are. If we were in a shore state, or a southern state, or even a Tornado Alley or something, maybe. But I just don't see it as being a priority. This state legislature just declared that natural gas, is green energy.
It's really, really unfortunate. And that's certainly something the Clintons can also take some blame for, having, after leaving office, both of them spent a lot of time and energy crisscrossing the globe pushing for more generation more extraction of natural gas, and we're seeing
Right.
some of the poisonous fruits of that. Also, Ohio is a very industrialized state, although I guess now almost post-industrial. There must be a real fear among many working people that environmental regulations may reduce their job opportunities.
Well, but you have to understand we're part of the Rust Belt, so there's not that much industrialization here anymore, which is one of the biggest problems we have. They did get that deal with the Intel plant to start making chips in Central Ohio, but those jobs aren't going to go to the people in Appalachia or down in Southern Ohio where people desperately need jobs. They're not really addressing those issues. And then when you look at farmers who got all these great contracts with these I'm trying to think, the fracking and everything, that's their main source of income, because there's not really a lot to be made in farming. So you've got that.
Yeah, but you
They're
have
also,
that. But what about the fears, such as the terrible train derailment in eastern Ohio, and of course now the name of the town escapes me. I'm sure it's at your finger. Palestine. Mm-hmm. Right? Is that causing at least some reconsideration of kind of a regulation-free political party like the Republicans?
No. They're looking at, recently there was another train derailment down in Clark County, and they finally came to a settlement there. But you've got, Senator Thiel, as I call him, J.D. Vance, who seat was bought by Thiel. You've got him saying, yeah, we're going to do something, and then backtracking and voting on this legislation in favor of the train company, and transportation. So, and yet on the other side of the border, you've got a governor like Shapiro, who's like, no, you will take care of our people. You will clean this up. You will get this done. Whereas, here it's like, oh, we don't want to upset the businesses.
Well, I have to admit,
people suffer.
I have been somewhat impressed, more so than I thought I would, with the new Pennsylvania governor. I think he's done a nice job there, Shapiro.
Can I tell you a funny story?
Please.
So recently, I was camping on the border of Pennsylvania and Ohio. And every time I cross into Pennsylvania, I go, we love your governor. We love your senators. And we cross back over into Ohio and we're like, we need you to go.
Well, do you see the lessons learned from the successful defeat of one being possibly used to win or to defeat, let's put it that way, Trump next year in Ohio? And I also want you to weigh in on Dr. West's run and whether you think that's going to be a problem.
Well, it won't be a problem here in Ohio because they're not a party and he can't get on the ballot.
Is that right? The Green Party doesn't get on the ballot in Ohio?
West, that's the People's Party, correct?
Well, he's also running as a Green.
As a Green?
Yeah, he will be running as a Green. And full disclosure, I have announced that I do actually support Dr. West's candidacy. I'm curious if you think there's a relatively sizable proportion of African Americans. They have not demonstrated in Ohio that they're particularly left-leaning, certainly as we saw in Senator Nina Turner's defeat in support versus Chantel Brown. So do you think, though, that West, a outspoken Bernie Sanders supporter, hard left, would have real appeal to a significant, and he has said he's going to go into white working class areas and talk to them about just how badly neoliberalism has destroyed their lifestyle as well.
Mm-hmm. I need to respond to two things to that. Okay. First of all, it wasn't the African American vote that defeated that went for Chantel Brown. She won because AIPAC came in here and spent millions of dollars, and there are certain areas where there's a very large Jewish population that DMFI, another organization, really, really pushed for that population to vote for Chantel Brown to defeat Turner. The other thing is it was an open election, not a primary. It was a primary, but you can vote whether you're Republican or Democrat in it. And the amount of Republicans that voted in that election was enough to give Chantel Brown the victory.
Yeah, there was significant crossover. That is true. As I understand it, the generally Democratic Jewish community did support Chantel Brown by a significant number. But that said, Turner's support in the African American community was not as significant as it might have been. And so clearly some of her support was eroded there. And in fact, Diane, even when I was making calls for Senator Turner, sometimes to African American zip codes, I heard people really upset about her criticism, and it was Biden, which I appreciated, but it clearly backfired, probably especially among older black voters.
Yeah, and again, taken out of context too, but that's politics. So anyhow, but I don't see Cornel West as having an impact. I mean, it would be like saying, Tim Scott's going to be able to pull in the African American vote. He might be able to with the disenchantment of the majority, from what I've read, of black males, right, feeling disenfranchised from the Democratic Party.
Are you suggesting maybe that Tim Scott could be Trump's running mate? Is that something you've heard? I'm just wondering because I wonder, because that would probably be a pretty shrewd move on his part to do that. I would have to say, if Scott were willing to agree to that. So you're seeing a close race. You're seeing Ohio. Would you say it's a toss-up, or do you think Trump has the advantage?
I'm wondering how he'll be able to run in handcuffs.
Well, there you go. So Georgia, we're going to transition real quick, and I'm wondering if your lessons learned will relate to this as well. Georgia did indict Trump. I think it's a very strong case, the strongest one. The tape is really damning. I've always felt that a lot of the Democratic criticism of Trump was more partisan based than policy, but this is a very powerful case. It's really just shows the danger that he poses. Is this going to make a difference in Ohio?
I think we're going to know probably by, I would say, April or May, where that's going to stand between all the different cases that he's facing right now. It's my hope that he'll pretty much decide he needs to drop out. But right now he's the front runner, and who knows what's going to happen. I just find it sad that there's a possibility that he could ever become president again. The man was a traitor to our country, violated his oath, and all those people that helped him with his conspiracy violated their oaths, those who were office takers, and elected officials. None of them should be able to ever hold office again. What's that, 14.3?
Yeah, and in fact, there was an article, and good for you for remembering that, because I completely forgot, and I worked on that campaign for quite a while. That was to urge secretaries of state across the nation to rule that Trump was disqualified from running for office because he violated Amendment 14, Section 3, which provides that insurrectionists, or those who give aid and comfort to insurrection, cannot run for office. Or if they were office holders at the time, they cannot run for office. And former really was originally written for former Confederates, but was written in a broad manner so that it's clearly continues to forward. Apparently, the Federalist Society agrees with that, and they have recently come out with an article in support of that reading and calling on secretaries of state and other election officials to bar Trump. So it's interesting. That's your cross.
That's interesting.
That's your cross section, or your across the aisle coalition.
So I've only got a couple more
Yeah, I was
minutes.
going to
So
say.
let's go back to answer your question, which was, what are the lessons learned? And I know you've asked me that several times since we've been
And I've
talking,
never
and I
given you a
just go
chance
off
to
on other
answer.
things.
Never gave you a chance to answer, but yes, now answer.
So again, the big thing is, as you said, coming out of this was coalition building. We can keep this coalition together and keep fighting together to keep the power of the people in the hands of the people. We've got a good chance of winning. So right now, we're already working on the reproductive rights ballot initiative. We've got a big push this weekend to start canvassing all across the state. And then we need to keep that and go into 2024 with that same energy. Can we do it? There's a concerted effort to defeat Sherrod Brown. The Republican Party has targeted him, and right now, he is our best chance of keeping a decent senator in office. He's not aligned with my. I'm talking to myself here. I'm not talking as our Revolution Ohio or anybody like that, but as myself. He's not aligned with me completely. Like, he's not for Medicare for all, but he's strong pro-union, and he's strong infrastructure. He's strong on climate. He's fought hard to bring dollars to Ohio, especially where I live, for Lake Erie. Keeping that and cleaning that up and everything, and keeping it sustained. So he's really been a good senator for Ohio, contrary to what we've got on the other side. And so, we've got that battle ahead of us to keep the Republicans from getting that seat. And it's not just for Ohio, but for the country, because they want to flip the Senate. So that, and what are we going to do? Do this ping pong, go back and forth, like, oh, we'll flip the House and they flip the Senate and nothing ever gets done in our country? So that's one of the lessons learned, is coalition building, building on the power that we've taken back as Ohioans, and keep that momentum going. And let's get rid of that supermajority in the state legislature. So that is the big lesson. And I think I don't want to knock on some wood, but I think we're going to be able to pass the reproductive rights initiative, but we have to work hard, and we have to keep this coalition going.
I'll let you go, Diane. Thanks so much. Really appreciate your time. Also got a shout out to you from Dan, who is watching the live stream. So he says, hey, Diane. All right, you take care. It's always great to see Diane, and I appreciate her time. We'll try to get her back when she can make it. Diane, all the best as you go forward, and keep us posted about the Buckeye State there.
Okay, thank you very much for having me. Take care.
Of course, my pleasure to have Diane. Also, hey, Dan, thanks for joining us. So I just want to play real quick, and I've gotten criticized in the past for being too, I guess, critical of the Democrats and not spending enough time going after the Republicans. And it does pain me to have to I don't want to admit I don't feel like that's fair. I think what pains me is that Trump is as bad as he is, because the argument I find so offensive that we have to vote for the lesser of two evils. And I think Biden has not, on balance, been a good president. I think the greenlighting the two pipelines is just unforgivable. He has been an oil and gas president, just as all the presidents before him have been. This is the greatest catastrophe the world may have ever faced. It may be we've already gone over the brink, and we're seeing terrible results from the climate cataclysm, human caused. And I don't believe Biden's done nearly enough, although he's done a tiny little bit. We did talk about how renewables are really ramping up. So that's good, but it's not good enough because fossil fuels are not ramping down. the trade initiatives, the neoliberalism, the failure to take on corporate America is just not acceptable from this president. And I'm not in the mood to come up with excuses for him or for his horrible choice for vice president or for the congressional Democrats for putting the Congress member from AIPAC and Goldman Sachs in the minority position. I'm not prepared to make any excuses for any of them, nor am I going to ask you to vote for the lesser of two evils. I was not persuaded in 2016 that Trump was the greater of the two evils. I was barely persuaded in 2020 that he was the greater of two evils. I think that January 6th confirmed that view. And as we move forward, as much as I think the Democrats have overstated the case against Trump and he lied, ignored, pretended that they're not really bad too, Trump is really bad. I mean, there's just no way around it. And I'm not going to call on you to vote for Joe Biden. I believe the right choice is Dr. Cornel West. I think we have to unite in support of Cornel West. But I'm not going to pretend that this guy isn't really, really bad. So let me play this clip one more time. The Georgia case is the strongest against Trump. It's the one that's least clearly motivated by partisan concerns. He was trying to illegally stay in office. He was trying to subvert the will of the voters. There's no question about it. And it was, I'm sure, sour grapes. I'm sure the narcissism played a huge role, but it wasn't quite like Hillary's sour grapes when she blamed the Russians. It was really a true attempt by this guy to subvert democracy.
We have won this election in Georgia based on all of this. And there's nothing wrong with saying that, Brad. You know, I mean, having a correct, the people of Georgia are angry. And these numbers are going to be repeated on Monday night, along with others that we're going to have by that time, which are much more substantial even. And the people of Georgia are angry. The people of the country are angry. And there's nothing wrong with saying that, you know, that you've recalculated.
Well, Mr. President, the challenge that you have is the data you have is wrong.
Now, do you think it's possible that they shredded ballots in Fulton County? Because that's what the rumor is. And also that Dominion took out machines. That Dominion is really moving fast to get rid of their machinery. Do you know anything about that? Because that's illegal.
This is Ryan, Germany. No, Dominion has not moved any machinery out of Fulton County. We're having.
Well, but have they moved? Have they moved the inner parts of the machines and replaced them with other parts?
No.
You sure, Ryan?
I'm sure.
All right, so that he should not be president. I mean, there's just no question. Diane's absolutely right. This guy should not be president. The problem is presidential elections are choices. And the choice the Democrats offer is really bad too, but not as bad. I buy it. I accept that. But I want a good choice. I want somebody who will be a good president. I want somebody who's going to fight for every American, for working people, who's going to fight for peace. And we don't have that president. Some good news. We had good news in Ohio. We talked about that with Diane. I expect more good news from Ohio in November as the people of the state of Ohio enshrine in their state constitution the right to choose reproductive rights. This is a winning issue in many places, many states. I hope Democrats take advantage of it. I hope they use it. I hope progressives use it. I hope we use this to push truly progressive bills, progressive legislation. I hope we should use this to demand Medicare for all across the board. Also, some good news on the climate crisis front from the state of Montana, where a state judge, a trial judge, held that because of the constitutional right that Montanans have to a clean and healthful environment, the state had to, going forward, consider whether any decisions it makes will negatively impact on that clean and healthful environmental right. And obviously, with all the coal mining and the oil drilling and the natural gas extraction in Ohio, and I have been to Ohio, I've driven across the state, and I know that it does all three of those in large numbers. And I've also seen the beautiful glaciers in Glacier National Park reduced drastically. Now, I was not in Glacier National Park before 2014 when I drove across the country with my wife. But I did see all the areas where there's scree and there's just dirt and some grasslands where previously you could see the glaciers were much, much bigger. You can also see images that the park rangers display for what the park looked like in 1950 versus what it looks like in 2014. And it's dramatically different. In summer, the glaciers are a pittance compared to what they were 60, 70 years ago. I saw the changes I remembered from 1970, I believe, 9. The summer of 79, I was in 78. The summer of 78, I was in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and I hiked for 5 days. And I remember 5 weeks, not months, weeks, 5 weeks. And I remember glissading down a glacier. In fact, my wife and I walked to that exact same bowl. And where there had been a long, several hundred yards thick, a very thick glacier that ran for several hundred yards down from the peak. Or from the ridge where you would glissade, that's where they ice axe behind you, and you kind of ski down with the ice axe behind your butt, and you can slide down, but not on your butt, but using the ice axe. You couldn't do that anymore. It was just all dirt, just a few little puddles and pools of ice, and some snow. And I remember that very distinctly. So I have seen the glaciers, I've seen before and after, and we don't have that anymore. We have a hot, often dry environment, sometimes incredibly damaging extreme weather because of what humans have done. The state of Ohio now will have to, going forward, consider that when making decisions with respect to green lighting, drilling, fossil fuel extraction on public lands, when it comes to paving over areas for parking lots, what have you. That will be required under this decision. Now, of course, there's going to be appeals, and it'll probably go to the Supreme Court if they can figure out a way to have to rule on a state constitutional amendment. And probably what the U.S. Supreme Court would do if they were presented with this, they would look to see whether there's some sort of conflict with the U.S. Constitution. That's how they could rule. They could say, well, yeah, we cannot interpret the Montana State Constitution, and it's not a federal law, doesn't present a federal question for us to consider, except to the extent that that constitutional right to a clean and healthful environment may conflict with federal law and the federal U.S. Constitution. And my guess is they would find the Commerce Clause would, which gives Congress the exclusive right to rule on commerce questions. They would determine that can limit the power of Montana to prevent development that's harmful to the environment. So I'm somewhat pessimistic about how far this decision will go, and even whether the Montana Supreme Court will uphold it. But for now, we can be very, very happy, very cheered cheered by a decision that actually gives the people of the state, a right that they can enforce, right? They can enforce. It's not just some sort of empty verbiage. It's a right that can be enforced in Montana courts to demand that decisions that are negative, that have a negative impact, cannot stand. That the Montana must protect people's rights to a clean and healthful environment. That's a huge decision. The fear, of course, and with reason, is that it'll be reversed. All right, here's what Dan has to say. Cornel West should run as a Democrat. I would vote for him without a second thought. If he did, so would many others. As Diane said, he doesn't even have ballot access in some states. Well, as a Green, he should have ballot access in most states, and that's really our duty, is to guarantee him ballot access, Dan, in my view. The strategy is that both parties are the problem. The strategy is the duopoly is the problem. The strategy is that I can't, as he said, the Democratic Party itself is part of the problem, and he is not going to run as a Democrat because he doesn't believe that the party is rehabilitatable. And I think that's fair. I think, you've heard what he said about the Democratic Party. That's what he said. Have you heard what I've said about him? That's why I can't run. I think he feels that it's reached a point where it's simply not reclaimable. And I respect that. I think it's true. I honor that conclusion by Dr. West. All right, you're watching, hopefully, or you're watching and listening to 240 Halitics, 240-363-7190, 240-363-7190. Love to talk to you. Tomorrow, no guest. Thursday, we'll have Liz Croydon on, Miss Lizzie. She's the comic. She's going to be doing a show in New York. And so we're going to have her on to promote her show a little bit, tell a few jokes, probably have a few other callers. I'm looking forward to that. So all that should be good. I wanted to comment on the Halitics Facebook page. There's a lot of negativity there. There's people being really personal. And I don't want to call anybody out, but I find that so just disappointing. And I really try hard not to criticize folks personally. I was going to play a clip, and I have a little more time than I thought I would. Maybe I'll get to it if I can. I was going to play a clip from Barack Obama, and I used the term asshole to describe Obama in that clip. I think it's fair. So if some people might say to me, well, how the heck can you possibly act like you're holier than thou when it comes to calling people out and being insulting and critical of people, making personal attacks, when you're going to call the president, the former president, who is much beloved, the only African-American president, you're going to call him an asshole? How dare you? How dare you have the temerity, the nerve to call out anybody for being rude, for being disrespectful, for being insulting? And here's my answer to that. President Obama was president. He was the most powerful man in the world. He's still one of the absolute most powerful, most privileged people ever. He's a handful of people with that kind of pull, right? He's right at the top. I'm punching up. I'm not trying to persuade Obama of nothing. He ain't going to be persuaded. He's not on my side. But I'm not going to call out or insult people that I'm talking to, that I want to hopefully at least persuade to join me on some issues, to see things my way in some areas. So that to me is the difference. It's one thing to call out a politician for being corrupt or for being condescending, as I think Obama was being very condescending in the way he discussed Trump voters. This guy, Obama, he's worth what, couple $100 million probably by now. He's got many houses. It really isn't right for him to be dismissive and trying to humiliate people who are just barely trying to get by. People that he didn't necessarily, his policies may have really, really harmed. His free trade policies especially. But also families that had loved ones fighting in endless wars in the Middle East that he promoted, such as the war in Afghanistan. So I find it, really, really irritating, upsetting when politicians act like they're somehow superior to those who didn't vote for them. That's your job, is to persuade people that you would be a good president for them. So I find that a completely different kettle of fish from a discourse, dialogue, colloquy on Facebook between people that hopefully we can come to some agreement. At least we can make certain assumptions about basic human rights, like the right to a clean and healthful environment, like the right to health care. If you're going to post in Halitics, and look, I get there aren't that many people on it, a little over 100, but hey, if you're going to post there, be respectful of the other people. And even arguments, you may think an argument is really a bad argument. It's stupid. It doesn't make sense. When people argue to me that climate change is a hoax, it really pisses me off. But I try to respond in good faith as best I can. Sometimes I fail. I urge you to do the same, if only because you're more likely to persuade people, right? You catch more flies with honey than with vinegar. All right, just a few more moments left. 240-363-7190. Let me see if I can get this on screen for you. I was really, was I pleased about this? I was kind of intrigued. Apparently, I have earned the top badge, or a top badge. Let me see if I can share this with you from our friend. Yeah, there we go. Let's see if I can get this on the screen for you. So, there it is. Look at that. I did it. I'm so proud of myself. I hadn't previously put this in my slide deck, but this was kind of exciting for me. Really thrilled. So Adam Schiff, one of the architects of American empire, guy who really never met in a war he didn't like, one of the prime opponents, I guess, Trump's bête noire, has called me a top fan. And let me say, when Schiff went after Trump, it wasn't for, violating due process rights of immigrants. It wasn't for ramping up Obama's drone war on steroids, things that led to killing innocent people. It wasn't anything like that. It was for the bogus Hillary or Russiagate, which he has never acknowledged was bogus. So I guess, I don't know. I mean, I am a top fan of Adam Schiff. I find that very surprising because whatever I've done on Adam Schiff's page has always been critical. But I guess they don't really look at the quality, just at the quantity of the posts. What's next for me? President of the Hillary Clinton fan club? I mean, that's where I think they're going to be, where I'll be going. All right, folks, just a little humor, very, very little for you. I will be back tomorrow. Hope you enjoyed today's program. Again, I want to give all mega shout outs to my great friend Diane in Ohio. Go Buckeyes. Let me say, and I'm sorry, my son will be devastated. He's a Terrapin, a Terp. They're here in Maryland. Join me tomorrow. Click like, click subscribe. We want to get those numbers. We never want to see those numbers do anything but climb, 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 climb. And with that, I wish you all adieu. Have a great afternoon, or a great morning, or great evening, or whenever you're watching this.